Two questions about the Brett Kavanaugh nomination for the Supreme Court. Number one, who will be in charge of rehydrating all those old people on the Senate Judiciary Committee after 4 consecutive marathon days of testimony? Whew. Second question, will Brett Kavanaugh get confirmed to the Supreme Court? I do not know the answer to either question. But one of the unexpected things that happened in the hearings this week for Kavanaugh is that he was revealed to have lied to the Senate on a host of things. A couple of them blatant enough to potentially follow him home, even if he doesn't get confirmed to the Supreme Court. The first has to do with his testimony in 2006 when he was a George W. Bush White House lawyer. He was up for a judgeship on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. The senators, understandably, planned to and did grill him about controversial issues that happened during his tenure in the George W. Bush White House. They particularly grilled him about the process of nominating judges by that White House and which of those nominations Kavanaugh was involved in.
During the Senate's consideration of Judge Charles Pickering's nomination to the Fifth Circuit, the Judiciary Committee learned that he solicited and collected letters of support from lawyers who had appeared in his courtroom and practiced in his district. It later became apparent that some of these lawyers had cases pending before him when they wrote the letters that Judge Pickering requested. Did you know that Judge Pickering planned to solicit letters of support in this manner before he did so? And if not, when did you become aware that Judge Pickering had solicited these letters of support?
The answer to the first question, Senator, is no. This was not one of the judicial nominees that I was primarily handling.
Brett Kavanaugh telling the Senate under oath in 2006 that this nomination, the nomination of Charles Pickering, was not one that I was primarily handling. Brett Kavanaugh's characterization of that work on the nomination of that judge has now been contradicted by White House documents that Republicans apparently intended to keep confidential so they couldn't be released to the public. Those documents got released to the public this week, and it turns out, according to those documents and his own emails, Brett Kavanaugh was absolutely working in the White House, putting together binders of information about that nominee, Charles Pickering, drafting a letter to a senator about Charles Pickering, working on an op-ed for the White House counsel about Charles Pickering, getting questions about whether they would need tables for a Support Charles Pickering event. And we know all that now because we can see it in black and white. But he denied having played a significant role in that nomination while he was before the Senate the last time they had him under oath in 2006. So just keep an eye on that question about his role in the Charles Pickering nomination. That's a name that is definitely not a household name, but Charles Pickering, back in the day, was a disastrous nomination for the George W. Bush White House. Pickering eventually got recess appointed because they couldn't get him through the Senate, and then he had to step down off the bench, and it was a big embarrassment. And he did do stuff to try to get that seat that was seriously controversial. So you might understand why, at the time, Kavanaugh didn't want to be associated with that very controversial nomination, that bad nomination, when that guy was such a bad headline for the Bush White House. So you understand why he might have done that. But saying he wasn't involved there, when we now know in black and white that he absolutely was, understandable as it may be, trying to save his own skin and stay away from controversial issues, that appears to have been a really blatant lie that he told in sworn testimony. Judges really aren't supposed to do that. Also, there's the time that Brett Kavanaugh got emails that had been stolen from Senate Democrats. They were stolen by a Republican staffer who then handed the stolen documents over to Kavanaugh in the Bush White House, who then used those stolen documents to plot strategy to get Bush nominees through the Senate. They had the Democrats' game plan. It made it much easier. Right? It's easier to get around opposition from the opposite party if you've got all of the opposite party's documents, memos, draft questions, research, etc. Right? That was a big scandal at the time. The computer servers in the Judiciary Committee got seized as evidence. People got fired. People were referred for prosecution. And so Brett Kavanaugh, as a Bush White House lawyer, nominated to become a judge, once they had him under oath, yeah, he was definitely going to get asked if he had had any role in that scandal, any knowledge of it. He appears to have lied in response to those questions under oath.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with any documents that appeared to you to have been drafted or prepared by Democratic staff members of the Senate Judiciary Committee?
No, I was not aware of that matter ever until I learned of it in the media.
I just want to clear up the questions that Orrin asked. You had said that Mr. Miranda never provided these documents, that were from this. Had you seen them in any way? Did you ever come across memos from internal files of any Democratic members given to you or provided to you in any way?
No.
Thank you.
No, never saw it. I had no idea that was going on. Never saw that. Nothing that looked like that. So in 2004, when he was first nominated for a judgeship, Brett Kavanaugh said no, he'd seen nothing. He'd been given nothing of the sort. He learned about it only from the media. His nomination was controversial, and it languished for a while. So they first brought him up in 2004. He didn't get confirmed. They ended up coming back up to the Senate with him in 2006. So he had to do a whole second round of hearings there. This is still a controversial matter. 2006, he gets asked about it again, and he appears to have lied about it again.
I did not know about any memos from the Democratic side. I did not suspect that. Had I known or suspected that, I would have immediately told Judge Gonzalez, who I'm sure would have immediately talked to Chairman Hatch about it. I did not know about it, did not suspect it.
Did not know about it, did not suspect it. I would have reported that had I had any inkling. Brett Kavanaugh on those leaked Democratic memos, those stolen Democratic memos in 2004 and then again in 2006. Now roll tape from this week.
Now, when you worked at the White House, did anyone ever tell you they had a mole that provided them with secret information related to nominations?
I don't recall the reference to a mole, which sounds highly specific.
This reference to a mole. You mean the tiny rodent that's kind of blind, looks like this? It sounds highly specific. It is highly specific, especially when a senator unearths and releases an email to Brett Kavanaugh with the subject line, spying, and the first line of the email says, I have a friend who's a mole for us on the left. And then the rest of the email is Democratic documents and research on judicial nominees. Democratic senators posted a whole bunch of emails from that Republican Senate staffer who stole this stuff from the Democrats, emails from that staffer to Brett Kavanaugh in the White House. This guy was providing Kavanaugh, quote, intel on Senate Democrats. He was providing, quote, my info on what was happening among Democratic staffers when it came to Bush judicial nominees. He was describing a, quote, confidential letter sent by a Senate Democrat. So Brett Kavanaugh has gone from saying in 2004 that he didn't have that inside information, he never heard about that, to saying in 2006, no idea, no inkling, I would have reported it if I'd heard anything about that, to now being confronted with the fact that he did have that information. He was told there was a spy, it was a mole. This is information taken from the Democrats. Confidential stuff, do not circulate. Now confronted with that, his explanation for it this week was that it's normal to have that kind of stuff. There's nothing weird about it. Today, the former Senate lawyer who wrote those Democratic documents that were stolen made a forceful case at Slate.com about this part of Judge Kavanaugh's record. Lisa Graves, writing at Slate today, quote, even if Kavanaugh could claim that he didn't have any hint at the time he received the emails that these documents were of suspect provenance, which I personally find implausible, there is no reasonable way for him to assert honestly that he had no idea what they were after the revelation of the theft. Any reasonable person would have realized they had been stolen, and certainly someone as smart as Kavanaugh would have too. But he lied under oath. Graves says not only should Kavanaugh, quote, not be confirmed, she says, quote, he should clearly be impeached. He should not be elevated to the high court. He should be hauled down from the federal bench he serves on now. And so, yes, the hearings of Brett Kavanaugh adjourned late this afternoon. Senators have until Monday to rest up, and then they'll submit written questions before the process moves on to the next phase. Confirmation fights play out all sorts of ways. How this one unrolls from here, we do not know. He is a historically unpopular nominee being put forward by a historically unpopular president, by Republicans in the Senate who enjoy a historically small margin in terms of their majority. But among the other things that Senate Democrats believe they exposed to damage the Kavanaugh nomination this week, Senate Democrats do think they got him on at least a couple of points that look like perjury. Now they'll try to make that stick.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.